Portcullis House.
Order. Can I welcome you, Minister, to as one of evidence session? I think we had a debate in Westminster Hall just before Christmas where I posed a lot of questions in the hope that you would appear in front of the committee around the introduction of the personal independence payment. So thank you very much for coming this afternoon. I'm glad that the snow hasn't held you up, and my colleagues on the committee have managed to fight their way through it as well. So that's great. Except for Debbie. I think she's arriving late. I think she's stuck somewhere where there were no trains. I wonder if you could introduce yourself and your team for the record, please.
I will. Thank you, Chair. It's a privilege to be here today. With me, I have Dr. Bill Gunnyeon, who is our Chief Medical Advisor, and also Simon Dawson to my right, who's the PIP Policy Manager, both from the DWP. It is the very first time I've been in front of the Select Committee, and I'm sure you'll take that in consideration and obviously go easy on me. She jests.
We are pleased that you are here this afternoon. If I can start with some questions around caseload and the expenditure. When the first time we heard that there was going to be changes to DLA was in the budget in 2010, when the Red Book said that there would be a reduction in expenditure, caseload and expenditure of 20%, a figure I think we've since realised was perhaps plucked out of the air. However, in the DWP's latest projection indicate that the reduction in caseload and expenditure by these changes will be around 27 to 28%. By the time PIP reassessments are completed in 2018. Why has that happened, and how can you justify going a lot further than the original projections in the budget?
Okay, I'd like to put the new PIP benefit into context of DLA and the need for a change, a need for a new benefit, which I know both sides of the House and the Select Committee had welcomed, that we need to move forward on that for various reasons, in the fact that many people didn't have medical assessments, 71% of people had lifetime awards, and what we were looking for was a fair system, a very clear system so people knew their eligibility, and one that at this time of fiscal constraints was workable, manageable, and would continue working for the future. And what we had committed to do was continue to spend £50 billion every year on benefits and support. What we said was the money that was spent in 2009 will be spending more every year until 2015. And so when we talked about the cuts, it wasn't cuts with the expenditure now, it was looking at the measured increase of the benefits, because it had increased by nearly 40% in 10 years, and that level of increase was no longer sustainable, and so we have to look at a sustainable benefit. So now that we know it's the reduction of growth and not of the figures, what we did have, and I'll take those figures, was a reduction of the growth by 20% by 2015, and I'm pleased to say that figure is now 14%. So we've actually reduced that reduction, and it will be a 14% reduction of the growth by 2015. And as for the May 2018 figures, to me they are hypothetical figures, because we're having a review in 2014, we're completely reviewing it, and really I can only pledge any savings during the time I will be accountable, which is in this Parliament. So the figures I can guarantee and will be looking at are those within the 2015 and this Parliament, which is less than we said we would reduce from the growth.
Can I just take a few of these things? First of all, the 40% increase. A proportion of that, the largest proportion of that was because of demographics. But those who are over 65 and already receiving DLA won't be affected. So that growth will continue, because all of these changes take place, will affect those of working age. The reason that the proportion seems to have dropped is because you're delaying the rollout, so that's understandable. But if you look at the DWP's own figures, one of the main reasons we were given when we looked at this last was the reason for reassessing and or abolishing DLE and introducing PIP was to get the projected numbers down. So the DWP's own figures say that by 2018 there would have been 2.2 million people on DLE if nothing had happened. Now your own figures are projecting that 1.3 million will get PIP. Now we also know from the figures that we have and your department has provided that 500,000 will get less support. So there's almost 1 million who would have got DLE and do get DLE and would have got DLE up to 2018 won't get PIP, and of the ones who will get PIP, there's another 500,000 that will get a lesser award than they would have done had they been put under the DLE criteria. Now that to me appears as though almost 2 in every 3 of those who are presently receiving DLE will either lose all of their benefit or lose some of their benefit once all these changes are rolled out. Now it seems a very high proportion. 2 out of every 3 who are presently on DLE or were projected to be on DLE by 2018 could lose either some or all of their benefit. Is that a figure you would accept?
The figure that I would say that of those being reviewed, 75% of people will have an award or keep the same award, and 30% actually get more of an award, because what we've actually done and what was key to our policy was that we were focusing the most support on those with the greatest need to live an independent life. And what we've got is, instead of 16% getting the higher rates, we've now got 23% getting the higher rates. So you are right, within the reassessment, some people will have less awards, some people won't get awards. But what we've said we do is focus our most attention on those who need it the most. And when people don't get an award, for some we know they will have got better. We know from surveys that actually 34% of people who might have had a condition one year won't have it the next. And that was actually part of one of the problems with DLA, is there was no systematic way of reviewing anybody's award, and we've got to look at that in the round.
But that could have been sorted by just reforming DLE and having periodic assessments. But can I just finish off? I'll come to you in a minute, Sheila. Is that the reason that the percentage has gone up is because the numbers have come down, and you're getting rid of the lower rate of care. So there's that whole section. It will no longer get an award at all. So of course the numbers who are then getting the award will be higher in proportion terms than exists at the moment, because the numbers getting any award will be a lot less. So I think my concern is that there will be people who have got quite severe needs who will lose as a result of these changes. They may not necessarily all lose all of their award, but they will lose some of their award. And I think, is that not perhaps why there's so much anxiety amongst many people where there's been a lack of clarity from the government exactly who the group of people will be, who will lose?
Well, there has also always been lack of clarity under DLA, people who never knew whether they were entitled, people who've done their own form of self-certification. And so what we have said within the system is that, that we will give real clarity on whether you know you're eligible or not. And again, I will repeat, our main focus was to those who have the most needs, and that's why we are focusing our attention in there. But I agree that within the reassessment, some people won't have an award, but some people will have more awards, and some people's awards will stay the same.
Well, I would be grateful if you could maybe establish as to whether of the cohort that would have received DLA in 2018, of that cohort, 2 out of 3 will either lose some or all of the amount of money they get from the government. And that
well, I want to. Oh, sorry, Chair. If I can.
No, I would be grateful if you could clarify whether that's actually I think that's what it appears to me to be, and it would be useful, I think, if you could maybe let us know whether that is actually is likely to be the case.
Well, what I said, at the very start, and I will continue to say throughout, is, to me, the 2018 numbers aren't a hypothetical, it's a hypothetical argument. I am dealing with the numbers I will be responsible for, which will happen within this Parliament, that we have modelled and, assessed for. Beyond that, I do not believe it's correct or fair to talk about, because it will be, a different, hopefully a Conservative government in full, but it will be a different set of, it will be a different Parliament.
In your opening answer to me, you actually used the growth in caseload as a reason for these reforms. So you can't now say, well, that was hypothetical, then you've used that as the basis of...
No, those growth in awards have happened over the last 10 years. Those growth of awards are going forward. I'm using those growth awards to 2015, so I'm giving the, real numbers that are happening and what we are working to. And equally, the other thing that we've agreed to do in 2014 is have an independent assessment. And we know this is a brand new benefit. We know there will be, looking at things historically, people change, modify things change along the way, so that's why we put in place this full independent review in 2014 where things might change, so I can really only give with clarity numbers to 2015.
Okay. Shiva.
I mean, I think, Minister, one of the problems with that is that it is your department which has issued those figures for the period 15 to 18, and I don't think in the way they were issued or in the statement that was made in December that point was made that somehow we should kind of disregard these. So a lot of people, including people who receive benefits, will have read these and thought that's what is likely to happen. So I think if you think that they are as speculative as you're now suggesting, would it not be sensible to issue a statement of reassurance to people that these are hypothetical, as I think you've said?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm hoping that that's what I'm doing today, is coming before the Select Committee to give clarity there and say that those are very much projected figures, without consideration of the independent reviews we've said we'd do.
But could I just ask you about some of the figures you just gave, and I may have misheard you, but you seemed to suggest when you started to talk about 30% of people getting an enhanced award, that I heard you talk about 70% would not be losing benefit. That comes to 100%, so actually some people will be losing, won't they?
Yeah, no, I said 75%, and I will clarify, but 75% of people will get, an award. It might be changed, it might be less, as you say, I am agreeing with that, but 30% of those will get a higher award.
So 30% is of the 75%?
It's of the 100%, yeah, but looking at two separate groups. So 30% of the 100 will get a higher, and 75% of people will get the same award, or will get an award. So there's two sets of awards going on.
Okay. Impact on the NHS. Grimond.
Yes. You've assessed the impacts of the PIP reforms on local authorities and their departments, and indeed the NHS in terms of budgets, workload, the quality of care. What conclusions did you reach, and will you continue to monitor the impacts on the local authorities and the NHS?
We're working obviously very closely with the health department, with local government, with the local government association, and we have modelled this, and as I have said, we are focusing our support on those with the most need. We're running parallel with the changes in social care and also what's happening with local government. So our assessment has been that there will not be, but we are reviewing this and we are working very closely. Now, I don't know whether I should bring in my colleague here, Simon Dawson.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. As Minister said, we're continuing to work with departments for health and communities, local government, the LGA and others to ensure that disabled people continue to have access to relevant support. We included information in the impact assessment published in May 2012, and we'll make further information available as it becomes available. But we, as I say, we continue to work with those organisations to assess the impact, but we don't believe that there will be a material impact as is the case at the moment.
There's a lot of change going on in local government, Altogether Better, where local authorities are involved far more in public health and well-being, so there's changes going on locally anyway. Do you think that in addition to that change in the way that local authority will be working, that these changes on top of that, is it an added extra burden on them at this difficult time when there's an awful lot of change already going on?
We don't believe that we're placing an additional burden on local authorities, but clearly that's why we're continuing to engage with them through the LGA and DCLG to ensure that both our changes and the changes that are also happening in local authorities are best aligned and best coordinated.
How are you going to monitor best practice with all these changes? How long do you think it will take to establish best practice and those beacon councils, those councils that understand this and are able and capable and actually do a very good job, and those councils that perhaps don't do quite as good job? How are you going to establish that?
I think predominantly through our links with the likes of local government association, the LGA, but I also think that the government's decision announced before Christmas to take a more gradual approach to the migration of the existing caseload from DLA to PIP gives us longer to ensure that our changes have the impact that we assess it will.
What sort of timescales? How long are you going to assess it for before you come to a conclusion?
Well, we're because we begin with a controlled start this April. We then go to national rollout in June. Then we begin assessing or inviting claims for PIP from people whose DLA awards are due to expire from October. And then we then start to reassess the bulk of the DLA caseload from October 2015.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we have a huge number of questions on the PIP assessment, as I'm sure you would have expected, and Anne-Marie's got the first lot.
Sure. Minister, you claim that your intention is that the majority of PIP claimants will undergo a face-to-face assessment. So who do you envisage will not undergo a face-to-face assessment?
Okay. Well, to ensure fairness, everybody will be assessed. We'll have information, historical information on people. We'll probably have medical information on people, and therefore where it would seem inappropriate, where we have gathered all of the information we need, and where it would seem only appropriate a benefit would continue, we will do what we need to do really on the paper basis. And if you're looking at numbers, in that regard, we would consider 25% of people would not need a face-to-face assessment.
So you're saying there's going to be a paper-based, if you like, first stage? Because from what you said, the only way you could do that is a paper-based sift. So what is the type of medical evidence which will, I presume it's going to be principally medical evidence, which would exclude somebody from face-to-face?
Well, what we'd have there is we would have the information. They would have filled out a form, and as I said, we would have had historical information on them, and from that we would have what we would have needed, and this is the information that the individual would have offered up on their behalf.
So this is purely based upon information you've already got and anything which has been voluntarily submitted. Yeah. So there is no proactive seeking of information to see whether or not actually this person can be excluded?
No, I mean, these are in the instances which you would have that information, which would be so obvious that it would not need anything. And I think we can all think of conditions like that where we wouldn't need to bring anybody in. It could be a serious degenerative condition. It could be various other things, and we would be able to do that. But everybody will be assessed just in that instance. Now, I would bring in Dr. Bill Gunnyeon on this, who's been dealing with this very closely. But that is the principle.
Okay, what would be helpful, I think, Dr. Gunnyeon, is really some clarity on the statement that the Minister just made, because I think the statement was that in certain blindingly obvious conditions it would be completely inappropriate, yet as I understood it, the government's policy was not to exclude specific conditions, but rather to look on a case-by-case basis, because if we're looking at conditions, then clearly the blind, deaf, the quadriplegics, why have they not been obviously excluded? Because the concern and worry they face, wondering whether they're going to fall into this 25%, is extreme.
And if I just ask, I think it's a relevant supplementary to that, and probably answer at the same time, is who will make that decision? Is that going to be made before papers are passed to the Atos or Capita, whoever it is, or is that going to be made inside the DWP?
Okay, let me see if I can help the committee. I think it's important, perhaps, to avoid confusion. If we think about what will happen for new claims, I think that perhaps clarify the process. Now, necessarily, I can say something about those who will be being reassessed. Obviously, in a new claim, we won't have anything previously relating to that claimant, and in that circumstance, what we will have as the first set, if you like, of evidence is apart from the initial information that will be gathered at the point of claim being made, whether it be a little bit about conditions and so on, what we will then have is what the claimant tells us in the form they complete, how your disability affects you. And that actually looks at their condition, it gathers information on their conditions, their disabilities, how long they've been present, and then it looks at the impact of those disabilities based around the 12 different activities, the 10 for daily living and the 2 for mobility. That in itself may give a very clear indication that either there is nothing to suggest that this individual's condition actually has any impact on their ability to participate in the activities of daily life, and actually potentially a decision can be made at that point. Equally, it may give information that indicates that the impact is such that for this individual it is very clear that it's going to be possible to make a recommendation to the decision maker, the case manager, that this individual will be possible to identify relevant descriptors in order to provide the information. There will be some, there will be some where it may, what will be helpful is to decide to get further evidence. Now that may be from the individual's general practitioner, from another healthcare professional, and in that form, how does your disability affect you? We do actually ask individuals to let us know who the different people are who would be best placed, and particularly health professionals but others, best placed to tell us about the impact of their condition on them.
So are you talking about there being 3 groups? One where it's blindingly obvious and they're simply inappropriate to have made the claim. 2, the ones where there's a question mark, and 3 were the ones where obviously, that absolutely they will need it and it's not even... There may also be those where it is clear, where there is evidence that it's such that it would be extremely distressing for an individual to have to undergo a face-to-face assessment. And again, that may be the circumstance where, for example, we want more evidence in order to be able to make a decision, if possible, avoiding a face-to-face assessment. And I think Ms. Gilmer asked when that would be made. That will be made by the healthcare professional, the provider, who gets the information.
To that immediately, then. Is it the case, or is this what I've heard, maybe you can tell me it's wrong, that the healthcare provider, the assessor, if you want to call them that, has a month from the time they get the papers to make the decision? And if that is the case, is that not going to be a very short space of time to do all of that and perhaps get information? Because I think we have had evidence from other situations that getting doctors in hospitals or other healthcare professionals to have a speedy turnaround of information is sometimes quite difficult. So is it a month? And do you really think all of that can be done, making that first triage, if you like, and then deciding who you're going to look at.
I think we just need to make clear that, excuse me, that there isn't confusion arising with the time that the claimant has to return their form, which is a month, but again can be extended where there is good reason. And obviously we're particularly clear on those who are particularly vulnerable and who require assistance. In terms of the timescale after that, Simon, can you confirm if it is 4 weeks we're expecting before the decision is made on whether or not a face-to-face assessment is required?
We'd need to take that one away, I think, and confirm.
So is it 4 weeks to decide that it's a face-to-face, or is it 4 weeks to do the whole thing? You don't know. You're not sure.
No, we do. It is, a process by which somebody would fill in their form, return it to a daughter. That's right. That's fine. And then more time will be allowed. That's right. And then, or however long they might need a little bit more. Different people have come in with different kinds of learning difficulties, support, various things. They've asked for a little bit longer. That will be sort of there. And then for the next bit, as Simon said, we will clarify that. I believe it is a month, but I will clarify that.
May I ask a question, Chair?
Sorry, I'll let Stephen intervene. Sorry, unless you want to
on the back of
fine, you carry on.
Carry on. So thank you, Emery. It's on the back of where you're coming from. I understand your conundrum in the sense that you clearly recognise, which is good, that there are obviously some people with some conditions where it is patently obvious, deaf, blind, as my colleague mentioned, profound learning disabilities, even quadriplegic, where it would not make sense to bring them in, which is good. And you used a figure of possibly as high as 25% could be paper-based. The conundrum is that the department is resistant at listing those disabilities because that can bring its own set of complexities. And I understand both arguments, but do you appreciate that what that may well lead to is profound confusion and anxiety for people who are going to be applicants because they don't really know whether their impairment is sufficient to be part of that 25% or not? So my question is there any way that within the guidelines or what have you, that the DWP can try and minimise that anxiety?
What we've always said, it's a personalised benefit. Everybody will be assessed, not all then on a face-to-face, as we've said, but everybody will be assessed and it is personalised. And what we've also said about this benefit, it's not about the condition, it is about how that condition affects the individual. And those are, key to this benefit. It's how the individual, the barriers affect that and how the barriers affect them to having an independent life.
Hold on a second, because Piran doesn't get a chance to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. Could you give us an example of a case, and let's take somebody who's deaf-blind, where their condition is such that you wouldn't automatically exclude them?
Yes, sorry, can you just clarify?
Yeah, you've got a point system,
yeah.
And there are some tests that have to be applied. And I guess my problem is that if you don't want to concentrate on a condition, I understand the ideological reason behind that, but if you actually look at somebody who is both deaf and blind, and you go through that checklist in terms of preparing food, etc., are you honestly telling me you think there is somebody, and perhaps you could describe what their particular affliction is, that is going to come out of that not needing the benefit?
It's not necessarily about a decision as to, what we're trying to do is to assess the impact of the particular disability on the individual's ability to participate in daily activities. And part of this is about the quality of evidence that we have on which to make a decision. And if that evidence is sufficiently strong that we can actually make the decision, then it will be clear that we will not require somebody to come for a face-to-face assessment. But we may not necessarily have that evidence. So you may identify a case there where we've got clear evidence. The information that's been provided to us by the individual or by someone acting on their behalf is very robust, or we've decided we need some additional information, and at that point it is clear. I think the difficulty is in actually saying anyone with a particular condition automatically will be exempt from a face-to-face assessment, because it is about looking at the individual and looking at all the evidence we have. So the clear desire is not to subject people to a face-to-face assessment where it is clearly unnecessary to do so. And our guidance for our providers, for their healthcare professionals, makes that very clear. At the same time, the intent behind this was, as far as possible, to see people face-to-face and actually be able to get better quality evidence. So it is about the quality of evidence we've got at that initial consideration, and what further evidence we might be able to get that would actually help us to make the decision.
In the report back, can I confirm that the department will actually obviously give the details of the people, give the numbers and percentages of people who didn't go to face-to-face assessment, but I would also ask, even though, as the Minister knows, I'm very, very, very pro the social model, I've got to be absolutely realistic here. Would the department also present in the report back what the different strands of disability were? I think that is important. Of the percentage of people, first of all, the percentage of people who don't go through face-to-face, you know, a year after your sort of annual reviews. But what I would also welcome is some data around what those disabilities are, because it would be unrealistic to completely ignore that, even though I appreciate the social model.
So after we have begun this, and as we are monitoring it on a daily, weekly basis, and maybe would you think that would be right on the 2014 independent review? Because obviously I'd like to work with the select committee on there. What is it that we feel the scope should be? What is it we feel we should have reviewed? So do you think that would fit into that?
I'm sure we'll come up with a list for you.
Yes, sooner rather than later it might come.
Can I just perhaps, because Dr. Gunnyeon was, you talked about new claimants. I think again all the members of the committee were, got an email from the Motor Neuron Disease Society, who are concerned that their group, who have got a very rapid degenerative condition, when their time comes, that they will be reassessed. They will have to go through a face-to-face interview, even although they've got upper rate DLA and upper rate DLA both in care and mobility. Can you give that group of a very specialist group of people the assurance that you're not going to expect that when they're migrated, or when they're not being migrated, are they? When DLA for them comes to an end and they get sent the form to reapply for PIP, that they are not going to have to turn up for a face-to-face assessment?
I think that's an example of cases where the expectation is that the evidence that they would be able to provide, and they are going to be familiar with things, having been on the benefit and having been through a system before, is such that it should be possible, it should be perfectly possible to make a decision on the basis of the evidence. But it is, again, I would emphasise, it's the quality of evidence that we have. But I think one of the things that we will be doing is making sure that people who are going to be, when that time comes, are going to be reassessed, will have plenty of warning, will know what it is we need. And in fact, on the form, how your disability affects you, it makes very clear, there's an information booklet that goes with it, it makes very clear the importance of giving us as much information as possible and making clear who the different people are who would be able to give us evidence about the impact of their condition. So we're working very hard to try and make sure that this process is as fair as possible, at the same time that it is sound, but that obviously we behave appropriately in relation to people who are able to provide the evidence and who've got the most significant disabilities, and for whom clearly a face-to-face assessment would either be inappropriate or indeed would be distressing.
I'll bring in, I think Simon Dawson wants to add to that.
Yeah, and just to sort of add to Bill's response, let's not forget that the special rules for terminal illness will still apply in PIP as they do in DLA as well, which gives that fast-track facility.
That, I think, will allay some fears. Jane was the next.
Thank you, Chair. You've alluded to the fact that assessment is in itself sometimes stressful and difficult for people, but obviously reassessment and frequent reassessments is something that is troubling quite a lot of members of Parliament. In the debate last Thursday, which was about the ATOS, and work capability assessment. You know, there were examples cited of very frequent reassessment. And I suppose a big question is, to what extent is the DWP looking across these two major reforms to make sure that people who perhaps have just been through an IB process, the work capability assessment, and perhaps even been through a tribunal and having a view on their award or not, and not then rapidly called back for assessment and causing undue distress if, for example, they've won a tribunal appeal against WCA.
I think we've got to be mindful of the fact, though, that the ESA and PIP are two very different benefits with two very different forms of assessment. One's whether you can do work, and one's what barriers you have to overcome and how we can support you in that. So I think that has to be put aside. But what I can say is that when we award terms, we will be looking carefully at that, about the length, about the duration, about what we can do, because again, with all the information we've gathered, it would only be right and appropriate to the person, to the claimant, that their condition is taken into a case there. And at the moment, we are looking into the guidelines to that. We are looking for further representations on that. Simon's taking this through at the moment, but that really is key. We know we've got to be measured really on that, and really rather thoughtful and caring on what we do there.
Yeah, and certainly I would add to what the Minister says, although we do expect to have to review entitlement to PIP awards. I don't think that we would be seeing reviews of quite a short duration as they are on ESA, for the very reason that the Minister said, the very different benefits. Entitlement to PIP is based on sort of someone having satisfying a 12-month qualifying period. Therefore, it's more about people with longer-term conditions. Therefore, we would expect to need to review their entitlement less frequently, but clearly more frequently than we have previously done on DLA.
Could you confirm that there's 71% of people who said had never been reassessed?
They were on a sort of a lifetime award.
Right.
And our view on that, some of them, 50%, never had a sort of medical supporting evidence. And what we're saying now is part of the positive things of PIP really is to look at a systematic review. And as we say, is how can we help? Because I'd view it the very opposite way. If you've put these people on benefits for life, what are we doing as a society to actually help those people, enable those people? Yes, I appreciate some people's conditions won't get better, maybe some will get worse, but there is a percentage of people who will get better. We have to be there for them in a very different way. How can we, help them to progress, to take an active part in society?
And just a last follow-up question on reassessment, just within the PIP process. I mean, has the department modelled how frequently that might be? I mean, is there a sort of, I presume to be able to model the costs and etc., there must be some sense of how likely, how often that reassessment on PIP would take place, if at all.
Sorry, is this for an award?
Just, yeah. So,
well, they would go between 1 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Simon, don't mean
We haven't. We have done some work on that, but we've not yet done the sort of detailed work that would mean that we're in a position to publish that yet. But as soon as that model is complete, we're commit to.
I think that would be great interest to us.
I think it also helps reassure, and it's also true in relation to the issue of paper-based assessments. Clearly, when we have got evidence from live running, we will be able to learn from it, and that's one of the things we're absolutely committed to doing, is making sure that as we go along, we gather evidence and we look at what that is telling us, and that will be true for prognosis as well, for what our expectations are, because it's not an exact science, for individuals as to when it is reasonable to review them, and whether in practice that's turned out to be right or not, and that's a huge source of valuable information, which will then allow us to refine our processes to make sure that we don't review people more frequently than necessary, but equally we do review people in the appropriate times.
Can you be transparent with individuals about what review period they can expect? So I think if you told someone you've got motor neurone disease, you'll have a review in 5 years or 3 years, I think they'd be a lot more comfortable with that than just this hanging less frequent in the air. So I think if you say you've got X condition, we'll need to review you every 18 months, at least they kind of know what's coming, rather than it just suddenly appearing through the door at random every so often.
the intention would be to indicate, obviously, at the time that they get the reward, what the review period would be. Absolutely.
But again, it won't be with a condition. It is for the individual, which we've always said. But yes, they would know when the review would be likely.
Can I just be, because I think you inadvertently suggested that if the DLA acts as a barrier to work, Minister, because you said about if they got better and we want to help these people, being on PIP or DLA and you get better, that wouldn't preclude you from getting on with your life or getting into work, because it is an in-work and out-of-work work benefit. And I'm sure you didn't mean to imply that, but that's how people will potentially understand your words, but I'm sure that's not what you meant.
No, if I misled anybody, what I meant is for some people who have been maybe put on a lifelong benefit, what are we doing to help those people? How are we, looking to, engage with them? And for me, that is key to make sure that everybody, as best they can, takes an active part in life and then the community in any which way we as a government could do that. I think that's a really important thing that we do.
How does the test telling you you're not entitled to a benefit help people? Will you be then referring them on to some other kind of help, to their local authority, to a voluntary organisation? Because we're discussing here whether people and how frequently people need to be reassessed.
Yeah.
And you're saying that if you don't reassess them, we can't give them help. So is it the intention that if people are reassessed and no longer need the benefit, because that's what the test is for, but at the same time there will be some mechanism for referring people on for other help?
No, I don't see it from that viewpoint. I mean that this, a reassessment, getting in touch with people, and by the way, some people, because they've lived with the condition could have got worse. They might need more support in another way. It's not about removing it from them. It could stay the same, but I mean that sort of continual contact in a way to say, here we are, what's it about, how are you getting on? And just to me, I think that's an important part.
How does that translate into practical help? Because this is a test about an eligibility for a benefit.
Yeah. And it's about that a person understanding their condition. It's about us understanding their condition, and it will be about putting people together, maybe recommending, advising stuff. As I said, for me, it is really key that we stay in contact with everybody and just assess them and have as much contact as we can to help them in their life. So the
DWP will intend, when it sees people and keeps in touch with them, to help them find help and support. So that will be an integral part of what you're doing.
Well, I think when you are assessing people, you are meeting them for an hour, these meetings would be, then you have an overview and you will engage in a conversation with that person. And yes, of course you will. In an hour's conversation, you will be talking about different things within that, how best you can get support and helped. Of course you do. Anybody would do that.
Well, it's not what happens, with all due respect, in the testing that's happened on a different benefit, but how's that going to be built in, and will we see that in the guidance so that the healthcare assessors that's part of their duties, because you're suggesting it would be?
I'm suggesting that the ability to stay in touch with people, rather than, as I see it, so many people having a lifetime award and not having any contact with anybody has, in a way, I would say people have been abandoned. Yes, I would, and I believe what we're doing with this systematic assessment, with this engagement, is a positive thing. We just maybe see things in a different light.
Are you aware that some people with lifetime awards are reassessed? It's not true that everyone with a lifetime award is never reassessed. Were you aware of that, Minister?
I am aware of how the process works, yes.
Because you constantly suggest that somehow they're never seen again.
Yeah, and I'm saying what we're doing, though, and the whole sort of dynamics of what we are doing as a department very much is engaging with people and seeing how best we can support people, and that's what we're doing.
Well, we look forward to seeing it perhaps in the guidance.
I think some of the contracts might be to be read. Stephen has got more on
a very important issue around fluctuating conditions that I'm aware the department, I think, did listen to a lot of the submissions made, and I was one of them, as were many others, and I welcome the approach the department did to assess the ability to complete activities safely, reliably, repeatedly and in a timely manner. A phrase I'm sure, Minister, you've heard numerous times over the last few months. But my question is, why limit this wording to the guidelines and not include it in the face of the regulations, on the face of the regulations?
Because when it was put in the guidelines is because we believe it is what is key to an assessment. It's also in the contract with the people who are doing the assessment, and it has always been key that those have been used in making an assessment. So it has just been throughout the whole process that those timely, safely, repeatedly in a timely fashion has always been viewed. However, because people like your good self have made representations on that, we will be seeing whether this is something that we can put into regulation, if it is helpful to put it into regulation and it doesn't actually become restrictive within that. I know Dr. Bill Gunnyeon has specifically been looking at this, because what might seem as a positive introduction to regulation actually might be limited, and we believed it would be better in guidance and the contract. But I'll bring Bill in on this.
Perhaps I can reassure that this absolutely was the intention as the assessment was developed. In fact, this is probably one of the most critical parts of the assessment, is because it deals with issues across a range of things, from pain, fatigue, all sorts of things. The ability to do things reliably is absolutely critical. So it's been core all the way through, and therefore whether it's actually in regulations or not, it will happen, and it is core to the whole process. I think the challenge.
Doctor, I think I dispute that, because I think if it's not in the regulations and in the guidelines, I think sometimes it will not be observed. There will be more appeals that will go through the courts, and case law will determine which route is followed rather than Parliament. So I really do believe that by not having it in the by not having it in regs and guidelines, the spirit and the intention may be appropriate and right for DWP, but it means it doesn't have to be followed, and I think that's where we would lead in, or we would develop some very serious problems.
I didn't mean in any way to dismiss your concerns. I do actually understand the concerns. What I was trying to do was firstly reassure you that certainly from the point of view of the assessment, which is the bit that obviously I've got responsibility for, that is absolutely core to it, and it will absolutely be applied, because the assessment doesn't work unless you do. But I think the issue about putting it in regulations, and as Minister said, obviously the Minister's given the commitment to look at this. The only thing we have to be cautious of, and this is my one concern, that when you start to put things into regulations, they have to be drafted in a way that the lawyers feel will actually not be open to any misinterpretation. And the words that we've got in the policy intent are not entirely easy to translate into legal language. That's the only issue, and that's why, as the Minister said, the slight concern we've got is to make sure that if we're doing that, we don't actually create the opposite of what you've perfectly reasonably identified, which is that there's a risk that if it's not there, tribunals and so on may interpret things. What we want to be sure is that if it is there, the wording can be such that same thing won't happen. So that's that's what we're looking at the moment.
And that's very encouraging. And so therefore, would you also accept that if that safely, reliably, repeatedly, and in a timely manner was, for instance, put in the regulations around the change from 50 to 20 metres, a lot of the concerns that people have actually would be obviated? Would you recognise that as a reasonable statement?
And that is in fact the case, whether it's in the regulations or not, because that is absolutely the way the criteria in Activity 12 would be applied. It would be dependent on people being able to do it safely, reliably, repeatedly in a timely manner. Absolutely.
So, reading slightly between the lines, would it be fair to say that obviously you're looking at that very closely at the minute, and could I, as the Minister's here, which is an excellent opportunity, ask that perhaps in the very, very near future a statement or what have you will come from DWP specifically on this, and possibly a statement which I think will assuage a lot of the fears and anxieties that people have?
Well, I will be giving clarity as soon as I have that into exactly what we are doing, and as I've said, that it is with the lawyers at the moment in checking that it will be doing what you hope it does and doesn't in any way give any greater barriers. So that is being looked at, and as soon as I know, you will know. And I will write to, maybe it's correct to go via the chair of the select committee. Yep.
I'm glad to hear that, because I think it is I'm sure the department agrees with me that when groups such as the Disability Benefits Forum, which is a very, very responsible representation of a lot of the different disability groups, when they have these sorts of concerns, they really do need to be listened to.
And the regulations have already been laid. I think that's a concern. So we're up against a really tight timescale, and they can't be amended as they are at the moment.
We have looked into that as well, how they'd be laid in the Lords and the Commons, and so that also the process by which those regulations could be added is also being reviewed. So yes, so it is possible, but we're seeing if it is beneficial.
Okay,
I just asked a question related to fluctuating conditions, and that's around permitted work regulations. One fluctuating condition is multiple sclerosis, and I've had a constituent write to me who said that he signed up to do some exam invigilating work. He's an MS sufferer, and had only done it for 14 hours in total throughout a whole year, but was told that because he had registered to do it for 52 weeks, if he continued to do this exam invigilating, he would actually start to lose his benefits. And I'm sure you'd agree that we want people to have purposeful activity. Is that? Could you just explain a bit more about the permitted work regulations, and is he right to be worried about losing benefits? Okay. And does it relate to whether his work is paid or voluntary?
Okay, that doesn't work with DLA and PIP, because actually it's a non-means tested benefit, and you can have it whether you're in work or out of work. This is really purely how your disability affects you and how we help people overcome those barriers in life. So it will not be dependent on whether you're working or not. You can get this benefit irrespective of being in work or out of work.
So he says that he was told by his advisor that because he'd registered for 52 weeks, he couldn't continue to do this, even though he'd only worked for 40
But not for DLA or PIP. That would be a different benefit.
So permitted work.
This is, yeah, that's why, totally separate. You get this irrespective of working or not.
Thank you.
I should have made a declaration at the beginning that I am in receipt of higher rate mobility, although generally people don't say they're in receipt of child benefit, but just to be clear. Or not, just in case we see it, absolutely. Sheila.
Yes, directly following from Stephen's questions, is there going to be an opportunity for the stakeholders, that could include the select committee and clearly the sort of disability groups that Stephen described, to have an opportunity to scrutinise the guidance before it's finalised?
I would hope that, that's what I thought you, as a select committee, would be doing anyway. So yes, I'd expect you to be scrutinising it and looking at them. When will those further guidance be?
This is the guidance on
guidance for... I think we're really keen that the guidance is published before the regs are agreed. Now, what we understand at the moment is that the regs will go through, commonly laws and be agreed, and then the guidance will be published. So the kind of assurances you've given us, we don't know.
The most recent iteration of the guidance will be available very shortly, so it will be accessible.
So before...
Yeah.
I just want to... This is a question that arose from something that was said earlier. Minister, you were very clear that ESA and the WCA and the PIP assessment, in your own words, were two very different assessments with two very different purposes. Mm-hmm. Can you then give us an assurance that in terms of the initial PIP assessment, perhaps when they're deciding whether people should or shouldn't be eligible, that one won't be used in the other? Because at the moment there are people who are having their application for DLA turned down which decision has been influenced by a WCA. And sometimes, and this is particularly worrying, sometimes when that WCA has actually been overturned by an appeal, but the information didn't seem to be passed on. So if they are two very different assessments, can we have an assurance that that won't happen, that a WCA will never be used to make a decision on PIP?
Okay. Well, what I will obviously confirm is that you're quite right, they are two different benefits, two different assessments, and what I will now seek to clarify here is whether information could be, that's what we're saying, can information be moved across between the two, and so before I say that, is Simon, go on.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify the position, I think it's difficult to say never in these occasions, because there may be evidence from one assessment that could indicate either a change in needs or either an increase or a decrease in needs for someone's entitlement to DLA currently or to PIP in the future. So I'm sort of slightly nervous about saying that we would never do that, because actually that may in some way work to the detriment of the claimant, and we wouldn't want claimants to go through unnecessary assessment when there was information that actually might support their claim or their reassessment for personal independence payment. But I think your point's well made on, in terms of that we should not simply be routinely taking the outcome of a WCA and then applying it sort of willy-nilly to either a DLA assessment or in future to a PIP assessment.
It might perhaps be useful if we had more information on the degree to which that does already happen in DLA, because certainly advisors in my area have reported that has happened on numerous occasions. Now to the 20 and...
Very quick follow-up. Sorry, Mr. Dawson, I was actually quite heartened to hear you say you wouldn't necessarily rule it out completely, because one of the things that constituents have often raised with me is that if they've assembled sort of complex medical evidence, for example, and submitted it, they're sometimes driven to distraction by the fact that two parts of the same department can't actually sometimes share something that it took a lot of time and effort to assemble. I mean, is that the sort of circumstance in which you could imagine some read across?
Exactly. That's the sort of thing that we do want to build into the design, because we don't want to be asking people to provide duplicate information from essentially the same organisation.
Thank you. Information, which is not necessarily the same as the point I'm making.
To be fair, I think the points sort of raised here are very sort of points that we should take on board, and I think we would look at that, because yes, you don't want duplication, but B, you don't want wrong sort of information. I think that's something that we know should be mindful of.
If I could turn to the change, which at least many of the disability groups think is a change in the threshold for enhanced mobility under PIP. The original consultation draft referred to not being cannot move up to 50 metres without using a wheelchair propelled by the individual, and then there was a lot of debate about wheelchairs and so on. But the final regulations are very different. They say can stand and then move more than 1 metre, but no more than 20 metres, either unaided or aided. Why has this changed, and why was there no consultation on such a big change?
Well, there isn't a big change, but what I think there was definitely a lack in communication, or communicating correctly what was happening here. One of the, I suppose, biggest inconsistencies was with the eligibility for high rate motability, because there was no clarity around what really that was. The original tension was unable to walk or virtually unable to walk, but over time it has gone to 50 metres. But within that 50 metres, some people could get higher rates, some people could get standard rates. So what we sought to do really was to give that greater clarity. And so what we'd said, and I believe the policy advisors and the medical advisors had sort of seen it as a positive advancement, that you'd say automatically 20 metres you would be entitled to, and then what we'd look at through the rest was the whole sort of safely, reliably, repeatedly being used across the full 50 metres. So you could get enhanced mobility within the 50 metres, but we were looking to
do you see why
that.
why it has to be a regulation? Because if it's just a guideline, then I think the real danger with the assessor is that some assessors will not follow it as rigorously as they would have to if it was a regulation. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Well, I don't agree with that per se, because I think once it's in guideline, once it's in your contract, once that's known that it's fundamental to how you give an award, I don't. But like I said, I have taken away whether we will put it in regulation. What I'm saying is we sought to clarify what was otherwise a very vague criteria for giving mobility, and that's what we looked to do. So actually everybody thought it was positive. I'll bring Dr. Bill Gunnyeon in here.
I'm very confused because you seem to be now suggesting that someone who can't move more than 20 metres, which is a very, very short distance. I mean, as I'm sure as Minister you're aware, it wouldn't take me from even halfway to the nearest bus stop from my house. In fact, even a quarter of the way from the nearest bus stop.
It wouldn't take you from here to the lift.
Yeah. Which would gather, and it does say no more than 20 metres. You then seem to be saying that there's another criteria somewhere in the background which about this safely, reliably and so on, which could extend that to 50 metres.
No, I'm saying there has been much confusion within the 50 metres as it stands now under DLA.
Well, under DLA,
that some people might get enhanced, some people might get standard, and what we sought to do was to actually give people sort of certainty within that criteria.
So
we've seen that as a positive announcement.
So it's 20 metres is it. So the safely, reliably and so on is really not particularly relevant here, is it?
Well, to be...
Not to this particular criterion. Maybe relevant to others.
Well, it's to all of it.
Let me actually perhaps help a little bit by saying, first of all, because I was responsible effectively for the second draft of the criteria, whenever you are doing something, and this has been an incredibly difficult assessment to develop, as I suspect many of you recognise, however well you try and do it, and however well you think you've designed something, and however well you think you've drafted it, with the benefit of hindsight, when you look back on something, you suddenly think, actually, that really wasn't as clear as we thought it was. And I would put my hands up and say that in relation to the second draft of the criteria around Activity 12, we knew what we meant, it wasn't clear, and we got on this one probably more significant feedback about the lack of clarity than on anything else in the assessment. Therefore, on that, we failed to communicate it clearly. We tried to do it in a way that we thought was helpful by trying to relate it to aids and appliances, which actually I think caused more confusion. And therefore, having taken all the feedback, we sat down and looked at it again, and it was always our intention that within those who could not manage to walk more than 50 metres, that there would be those, that our intention was to identify those who would have the greatest difficulty, because that's the whole purpose of the assessment. But that there would be those, and can I say that the safely, reliably and repeatedly would apply across the distances. So you may be able to walk 20 metres, but if you can't do it safely, reliably and repeatedly, you would qualify. We tried to remove the confusion about...
If I couldn't say, your mistake there was that as soon as I saw it, I knew what was going to happen, and with respect, I've been an MP now for 2.5 years, and I finally said with respect to them, with respect, if you had checked with a couple of those disability charities, they would have told you instantly that 250,000 people are thinking they're going to lose their Motability car.
And I think we say mea culpa that it was the communication, not the intention, and that's correct.
Is it not the case, potentially, in the way it was drafted at first, that somebody who could say 30 metres or 40 metres would be eligible, whereas now they're not eligible?
they would have been eligible for one of the rates. I think the important thing to remember is that what we've done now is that for people with a physical limitation, it is possible to get the standard rate in PIP. It was not possible to get the standard rate in DLA with a physical limitation.
The wording of the consultation draft says cannot move up to 50 metres. So 50 is mentioned, and it's mentioned very specifically, not as a proxy for virtually unable to walk, which has been what's happened. I mean, with DLA, clearly the wording was virtually unable or virtually unable, and through case law and so on, virtually unable tended to become proxied by 50 metres. But this consultation draft mentioned it does mention a very specific distance, and many of the groups feel that there's a big difference between that first formulation and the second formulation, and that was not consulted on in between times. It didn't come back and say, oops, we now think we've slightly got this wrong, maybe in October or November, and this is what our next iteration is before publishing the final regulation.
But I think what I'm saying is that the policy intent was clear all the way through. It was confusion and lack of clarity. We listened to consultation. This is the way we decided to clarify it, and in then looking at testing that and modelling that, it is clear that the numbers who score 12 points on activity 12 are broadly the same under both the second draft of the assessment criteria and the final criteria.
But the policy intent may have been clear in DWP's heads, but it certainly doesn't seem to have been clear to a lot of people.
No, and I think that's what but I think I accepted that.
The numbers who have changed substantially in the projections in the intervening period as well. So that from the first draft of the regulations to the final draft, the number of people anticipated, okay, we're back into the hypothetical, I know, 2018 stuff, but nevertheless, the number who were expected to lose or not to get enhanced mobility was stated to be 280,000, and following the final draft, the figure is 428,000 fewer people. Now, that is a substantially different number. Is that as a result of this change, or why has that number changed so much? Because clearly a lot of people looking at this is thinking, draft 1 said this, draft 2 said that, draft 1 suggested the numbers not getting enhanced mobility would be fewer by this, draft 2 says it's fewer by that. So is there no relation between those two? Is it purely coincidental that the numbers who are not going to get this are now higher than they were previously?
Well, I think, once again, you've gone to the 2018 figures,
but
not the 2015 numbers, which I've said very clearly at the beginning is what I'm working to.
These are comparators. Sorry to cut across you, but these are comparators that on both occasions you have given. And, you know, I don't think you can completely say, unless you now want to scrap all those 2018 figures altogether, that you know, there's not a comparator there.
No, what I'm saying, and which I made very clear at the top, the figures that I will be working to, because we've agreed that it's within this Parliament's 2015. We've also agreed to the independent assessments where, you know, things, independent reviews, where things might change. What I'm saying is I will work to those figures, and within that, they have remained as we had said prior to.
Well, they haven't really. You know, the figure for 2018 for the end of the process of reassessment was that 280,000 fewer people would get enhanced mobility. The figure now for the end of the reassessment process, or the reapplication process as it truly is 428,000. Now, that does seem to be a big difference. And a lot of commentators have associated that with the change in the draft regulation.
Well, you know, we'd said at the beginning that if I was here to add clarity, which I am, if I am here not to talk about hypothetical figures, because I don't know where they'll be there, but I can tell you where they will be by 2015, and those are what we had is the same sort of figures and reassessment. So I would sooner keep to what we know will happen rather than what we don't and what we're speculating about, because I don't want to mislead anybody who, you know, was taking information from today.
But the 280,000 before was of the whole caseload. And you're now saying that a similar number are going to not be getting it by 2015, which is far less than the entire caseload. So it's still a different number.
Well, 200,000 it would now be by 2015 is what we were looking at, yeah.
But this is a different... When that figure was given previously for the end of the process of reassessment, that was having not just new applicants, but everybody who currently in that age group who has DLA would be going through the process of having to reapply. So those numbers are, if it's 200,000, let's just use 200,000, although I think it's 280,000 now, 200,000 would have been 200,000 in comparison with the entire numbers that we've been dealing with. Whereas by 2015, by October 2015, new claimants will have been assessed, and about 500,000 people, we're told, who currently have DLA, will be reassessed during that period. So it's a far smaller group from whom that took. So the numbers are still not comparable, however you present them.
Well, as we'd said, you know, the intention was the same from the second draft to the final draft, and those figures remain roughly the same from the second to the final draft, showing that it was a communication, which we'd said from the beginning, not an intention change. And
so
those.
What
those
is this figure about 428,000 then, which is, you know, in your own figures that you have presented, you presented to Parliament in a statement in December, the figure of 428,000 was given.
No, I know we're going over the same ground, and I want to tell you what is happening, not what is hypothetical, what could happen after 2015, which we've said before. There is a general election there. We've got to have independent reviews there. There might be alterations there. So I don't seek to give misinformation out to people who it means a lot to who could be watching this. I'm giving you the facts to 2015, and I hope we can stay there, because I want to make sure people who are watching this, people who read the news after this, know for certainty what is happening to them for the next couple of years. So I really don't think it's correct to pursue those incorrect numbers.
Given those figures, why were those figures given to us in a statement to Parliament? Because there does seem to have been a difference. And if you are now trying to see that they're the same, because in the period between now and October 2015, there's going to be fewer people go through assessment because you're slowing the process down. Mm-hmm. But of those, the number who will not, you think, get enhanced mobility is going to be about the same as the number that you anticipated previously wouldn't get it when you had done the whole caseload. I'm obviously not making myself at all clear.
Well, it's less than it's 200,000. What I'm saying is let's deal with the figures that we've got, that we know, which were the same between the second draft and the final draft, and then we can work around those. But please, let's not bring in a set of figures which is not relevant to today or this Parliament, or which I would be, or I'm responsible for.
Can I perhaps bring it back to a more practical level, because there are people with, again, we got a briefing from the MS Society, very, very exercised by this change, incredibly exercised by this change, and I watched someone with MS on Saturday who was attending the same meeting as me. The disabled parking was 30, 40 metres from the door. He got out of his car and walked with his walking stick. He stopped more than twice, absolutely exhausted by the time he got into the meeting. Now, by the criteria here, that means he would only get 10 points because he can move more than 20 metres. Well, actually, probably in a runner could probably manage the 50 metres. He could probably do more than the 50 metres. But from his first step...
But Diane, can I clarify the issue of safely, reliably, repeatedly in a timely manner would become highly relevant here, because you've identified the fact that, you know, not only did it take a while, but there's an issue about him being exhausted at the end of it. So that is why this is so important throughout all the descriptors, is that ability, because somebody may be able to do it, but if they're then not able to do anything for the next few hours, or they're exhausted the next day, clearly they're not then going to be considered able to do it, and they would actually get the points.
But where does the measure start? If he could walk the first 30 metres comfortably and then struggle, then that means he ends up not getting the enhanced rate. Is that right?
If that's correct, and there are no other factors around the safely, reliably and repeatedly, then yes, that would be the case. But it's important
it's from the first step. Because the other thing is quite a number of people who, in fact, more than 50% of people who use wheelchairs can actually walk a bit. And if you put buggies in, it's probably an even bigger proportion. They can walk. Lots of people who use wheelchairs outdoors or to go shopping or whatever don't use them in the house. Now, there's a feeling again abroad that anyone who is mobile without a wheelchair around the house, because they've got handholds or whatever, and they can actually manage quite well around the house, are not going to get enhanced mobility. Is that right?
No, because it's going to depend on whether they're able to. Remember, you've got to be able to stand. You've got to be able to stand. You've got to have also one normal foot on the ground. So double amputees, for example, bilateral amputees, clearly would not meet that criteria. You've got to be able to stand, and then you've got to be able to move that distance, and you've got to be able to do it safely, reliably, and repeatedly. And that's the issue. And you know, the issue of whether somebody could only do it with particular aids or appliances as well. So it is about looking at the individual case, and I think it is very easy to generalise. I think what we have done here is to try and provide clarity so that the assessment and the descriptors can be applied consistently, and as far as possible can identify correctly those in that area around mobility who face the greatest challenges in terms of being able to participate in the activities and that are within the two mobility activities. And remember, of course, that the mobility, the decision on mobility is a combination of activities 11 and 12. It's not just activity 12.
Well, in your response, you say that the reason you've chosen the 20 metres, and I'll come back to whether it was consulted on or not, the 20 metres would get you to the door of the supermarket. But the person who can walk to the door of the supermarket, how do they get round the supermarket? How do they get back the other side?
That was 50 metres, not the 20 metres.
Or 50 metres gets you to the door of the supermarket, but how do you get round the supermarket? And how do you 50 metres is not a great distance. It doesn't allow someone to do a supermarket shop, for instance, and yet they will only get 10 points, they won't get the enhanced.
But in the policy intent in DLA, they wouldn't get anything at all if the intent was being adhered to. Here they would get the standard rate.
Which is good, and that's why I think, again, and we don't want to go in circles, but you're clearly picking up how anxious we are on it. That's why the disability bodies approved of the timely, safely, etc. Their anxiety is that being in the guidelines doesn't give it enough clout. Yeah. I know you've heard us, and so we look forward to.
Yeah. And where did the 20 metres come from? Because again, the feeling is that was plucked out there. It certainly didn't appear in any of the evidence that we took when we looked at this as part of our previous inquiry. Nobody had mentioned the 20 metres. The only thing, with hindsight, I can look back and there were exemplars given of what people would get under PIP, and one of my criticism was we didn't know what we would have got under DLA. You just give and there was a chap who was, I think, an ex-miner with arthritis in his hips and couldn't use a wheelchair or a walking stick because his hands were too bad, and he didn't get the enhanced rate, and I thought that was unusual when I read that as a descriptor. But that fits in with what you've now got here, but that was not in any of the consultation papers.
No, and I think we were seeking to clarify and to try and achieve the policy intent and doing it a slightly different way. I think the issue here was one where we might have, and I'm sure the Minister would agree with this, we might have communicated this differently. It was not an intention to do anything different, and it was a response to the comments we got in what was quite an extensive consultation, to which we did listen.
Can I ask about passporting things? Out of a lot of the upper rate mobility passports, and the thing I find most precious of all is actually my blue badge. It's the most important thing. It gives me access to the wider bays and stops me having to travel in wheelchairs quite the same distances. But the automatic entitlement to a blue badge only comes with upper rate mobility DLA. There will be people who have got very limited mobility who are only getting 10 points under these new descriptors, but they won't automatically qualify for a blue badge. They won't qualify for a freedom pass, the rail card, without going through another assessment potentially. But the ease for all these other organisations that don't have to reassess people because they have the upper rate mobility. DLA acts as a passport. What's going to happen?
Well, we're working on the passporting at the moment. We're looking at working with the various different departments to see how we can best enable people with the passporting.
Yeah, we've maintained the passports that existed on DLA and translated those over into personal independence payment. Clearly, if people don't qualify for personal independence payment, then they will have to apply separately for a blue badge. But who's
going to know they've got 10 points? Because there's a big difference between the 8 points, which gets you the standard rate, but they've actually overscored on that, but they haven't scored enough to get the enhanced. So they've overscored, so they've obviously got quite severe limitations on their mobility.
Individuals will. Sorry to interrupt. Individuals will get their point scores.
They will.
When we they will. We're introducing in notifications from October next year. So we will be, and people can request it before that too. So people will have point scores, so they could use that in support of any separate claim for benefits and services to which they wouldn't be passported.
Okay, right. I think we better move on, and I've forgotten who I'm moving on to now. Section 3, but I can't. Is it? Oh, Teresa. Sorry, Teresa. Got caught up.
Can we just move on to the actual contracts themselves? The contracts have been given in sort of regional lots, and one contract's gone to Atos and one to Capita. Did you consider commissioning more than one supplier in a region so that you could compare performance at all?
Well, what we were looking at here, obviously we need consistency, but we were also looking to see could we develop best practice and learn best practice across different providers. But we knew that before we could maybe go to multiple providers, we would like to ensure that we'd manage to develop this in different regions. So there were many thought process that had gone into that. We had many bidders, various people on the framework. We looked at which was the best quality, which was the best service, who were we going to work with, but we have to make sure that this works, that we can roll it out. So as it came back, we've got our providers and we've got them in the different regions, and we thought that was the safest way forward.
But in the work programme, you've got multiple suppliers in the same region. Did you not see any advantage at all of having more than one supplier, so they actually would bring each other up to speed in many ways and they could share best practice? Did you?
Having the ones in different regions, we can get best practice there. Two different companies are going to be doing it in different ways, obviously guided by
so you'd be able to compare the different regions against each other rather than the different providers.
And what different people are offering. So whereas you'll find that Atos is working closely with different health providers, so that the clients will be going to local sort of clinic centres, local hospitals, you'll find that, say, Capita has said, well, what we'd look to do is do a significant number of home visits. So we're working out there what is the best. Say, Capita said that it would employ 60% of people with disabilities. So we are looking at what is best practice and how we could share that across, still maintaining a very coherent assessment across the whole of the country.
And I think one of the things, Minister, that might help is that, of course, there is quite a difference between the work programme provision, which is very much sort of black box, so it's for the providers to be able to decide how best to work with people to help them return to work. And in a sense, they've got complete flexibility. When we're looking at this assessment, we actually need this assessment done by providers to a very fixed protocol so that we get consistency across the piece. So there is a challenge, I think, to jumping too quickly to too many providers until we know that we can actually manage quality and consistency across multiple
I hear
providers.
what you're saying. Yet one of the key points is that Capita has said they expect a large number, not just a number, but a large number of consultations will be done as home visits. And yet this is something that Atos don't really do, apart from extreme circumstances, normally under the work capability assessment for a start. And they've said they don't really plan to do that going forward. So does that not mean in different regions people get a different service? You know, I mean, lots of people would want a home visit, yet it's not going to be available.
Well, they've developed differently, you're quite right. Atos was taking it that maybe the claimant would want to go to locations that they knew well and they could get there. Capita viewed it in a different way. Equally, I think I'm right to say, Bill, that they're in different geographical locations. So it could be easier in some to do home visits. But it is about best practice here. It is about learning about how we can take this forward. And we welcome that people are doing it differently so that we can monitor both, which we will.
But I think what's important to remember, though, is that the actual assessment that is being done, whether it's being done in a clinic or at home, is exactly the same. So how the assessment will be done, how the evidence will be gathered, how the criteria will be applied, has to be the same wherever. What the issue of home visits is a matter of customer experience, claimant experience, and that's obviously the benefit of innovation and different providers. But the actual assessment has to be the same wherever it's done. We have to go through the same process.
Mr. Gunnyeon, Dr. Gunnyeon, you said earlier on at the very beginning, you talked about people who wouldn't have to come to face-to-face assessment, maybe a paper-based assessment, and you talked about people who would find a face-to-face assessment extremely distressing. And one of the things that people find extremely distressing is actually getting to the centre. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is Capita are expecting to do a number of home visits, Atos aren't, but will people have the right to ask Atos to visit them at home if they find that extremely distressing?
Absolutely. I mean, there will be very clear circumstances where it's entirely reasonable and indeed appropriate for an individual to have an assessment done at home, and Atos will do those. Will do those on those occasions, and will obviously, in the guidance, will be looking at the sort of criteria to make sure.
It is my experience with the work capability assessment is they are quite resistant to home visits. And in this particular group of people, I think it's important that if they, with their own condition, knowing how they manage their condition, they deem it necessary, then it shouldn't be just because they're in a geographical area where they don't have Capita and they have Atos, that they don't get that.
You're quite right, and we would expect about 8% of visits will be home visits. Right in that figure, roughly about that. It might be less, it might be more.
I think it might be slightly more actually in practice.
Yeah, and that's irrespective of so that would be Atos too, and that's what we've seen. So somewhere there, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Dawson, we talked earlier about people having to go back for reassessment, and you were asked, I think Jane asked you a question and somebody else about how often that would be. And you said you're still doing some modelling. Given that you know the number of people who currently claim DLA, you will have some projections for new claims. Without knowing how frequently people are reassessed, how can you make sure that this contract is good value for money? You must have had some numbers in there to know the number of assessments.
Yes, and we've actually, in the technical briefing document we published on the 13th of December. I think we published the number of assessments we expect to do on a quarterly basis from now through to 2016, I think it is. Some of those, that information fed into assumptions we made about volumes in terms of the contracting process.
So in that, when you modelled that, to be able to put the contract out, to know whether it was good value for money and they could deliver, you must have had some idea about how frequently people would be reassessed.
We will have made some relatively high-level assumptions, I think, but obviously
so that could vary quite a bit in reality.
It could, but the contract is, as I understand it, is a fixed price contract, so is not now affected by the volume of assessments. But I'd need to probably defer to Dr. Gunnyeon on the information about the assessment.
It's a fixed price contract for a number of years, or for a number of...
Yeah, it's a 5-year contract with additions by 2 years. The ones which I've got that I know the figures for lots 1, 2 and 3 is £598 million for the full 5 years, yes.
So that quite significantly differs from the work capability assessment contract, where they're paid for the number of people they see, whereas in this they're just paid to deliver the service. Is that what you're saying?
They have, well, it's quite a complex contract that they've entered into, and within that there are various levels, but that is the costing over the 5 years. And yes, they would have modelled what they've done, and they would have worked out how they would have come to that conclusion. As I said, 19 bids came in from 6 different organisations, and we looked at quality, we looked at deliverability, and we looked at costing, and that's how it was fixed. And beyond that, I don't run the commercial project, but I know that is what they're doing.
Okay, Atos Healthcare, it's been reported that they are going to subcontract the delivery of the PIP assessment in Scotland to an arm of the NHS.
Mm-hmm.
Would it not have been more cost effective to just contract directly with NHS suppliers, or was there something that meant that you couldn't do that with the public sector?
People applied to go on what would be the framework. Different people applied to go on that. In that case in Lanarkshire, they didn't apply to go on the framework, but they could have bid to have done it. And what people have decided to do is what they could bid for, what they felt they wanted to bid for, and in that case, as the providers will be working closely with health professionals, with organisations, that's what Salus in Lanarkshire decided to do, but they decided themselves not to bid for the entire contract, so that makes sense.
So in the framework there was nothing that prohibited public sector organisations, it just happens to be that they didn't bid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could that have had to do with size though?
Sorry?
Is it to do with the size of the contract? Because Salus is not, it's not the whole of the NHS, it's just a relatively small arm, isn't it?
Well, that might well be, but I guess it's up to an organisation, a business, an individual to say, well, what could we do? What would we like to get involved with? And how we can do that? And that's what they've done.
It wouldn't have precluded consortia, for example, of smaller organisations coming together.
Given that one of the key complaints about Atos at the beginning of the work capability assessment was the fact that some of their assessment centres weren't accessible, and we heard only in November last year that still some aren't accessible. What steps are you going to take to make sure that this group of people that we're now going to be assessing will be able to actually get to the centres? If there is a centre that's not accessible, will they be automatically given a home visit?
They wouldn't be going to that centre. They are all accessible. It's all ground floor, and that has been carefully and obviously done within the contract, so that won't happen here.
Atos have 100% agreed that this won't occur?
Yeah.
Good. For PIP and DLA.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what we're talking about today.
No, because we were all rather horrified, weren't we, that there were 6 centres
still
responsible 73% of the inaccessibility assessments when the Minister for Employment gave evidence. So we'd be especially keen to know they're not being used.
No. Well, it is totally separate part that are doing this in a totally separate...
If it's the same provider, you can see where we'd ask the question.
Atos are not going to be using any of the centres they use for WCAs for PIP.
Okay.
Right.
Can I just ask about monitoring the quality of the process? I mean, you'll be aware from the debate last week on the work capability assessment process, issues about the quality of the process. People describing it as degrading, dehumanising, getting things wrong. I had a constituent on Friday who was saying that her father had been going through a process, was told he was in the middle of a heart attack as he was in that process, told that they had to stop. When it came to the actual results from that, it was said that he had left the assessment, and as a result he was sanctioned. They got personal information wrong, saying he had sons rather than daughters. It was just an absolute mess. So this is, you mentioned before in terms of, in the assessment, how important it would be around the judgment in getting things right. How will you be monitoring quality to make sure that you're getting it right first time, that people are really anxious about this? People aren't going to be traumatised as they have been going through WCA.
Okay. Well, I think I'd like to put this in context too. We've said very clearly they're very different benefits, very different assessments, and you're quite right. There were failings in the ESA. That was something we inherited. That is something we've tried to put right. We put Professor Harrington in place and we said, look, this came in under a previous government, but let's hang on a sec, but let's get this right. And we've put it through a review, and we are still trying to get it right. However, as this is a totally different assessment and benefit, we have put in it stringent conditions, we have put in stringent monitoring, and you're quite right, we will have learned from what had gone on in the past, and we are ensuring at every bit. There are also levels to which, with the service levels guidelines to which people cannot go above or below on any failing rate, and it is totally closely monitored with very high specifications of getting this right. Bill, you might have some of the levels there. I was looking at the various criteria beyond which they couldn't sort of fail.
I think one of the important things here is that having designed a new assessment, the competencies and the training of the health professionals who are going to be doing it is absolutely critical, and we are working very closely with the providers as they develop their training programs, which we will agree how they will assess competencies, and actually we've got a more robust process before anybody is going to actually be allowed to undertake assessments, because they will actually not only have to go through the training, they'll have to demonstrate their competency before they start to do actual supervised assessments. They will then have a period of supervised assessments before they are able to undertake unsupervised assessments, but for a further period all their assessments will be audited, and then there will be ongoing random audit, and we will be looking very closely. The IT tool that the assessment providers will be using is also designed to try and gather comprehensive data about performance and actually help us to be able to monitor as well. So consistency of application, quality of reports, and the claimant's experience actually very important as well, and getting feedback on that.
And are there sanctions built in or penalties built into the contract if this isn't delivered?
Absolutely, there is.
Right.
Yeah, there's remedial contracts or stipulations throughout, and obviously the ultimate sanction would be them losing the contract altogether. So yes, there are.
And on what level of dissatisfaction?
I was looking through my notes there, but there are For example, because I haven't got the numbers there, it is something like 0.5% of customer service. Should they have any higher dissatisfaction than this tiny percentage? Again, on medical reports, it's about, again, 5%. And should anybody have any higher than those levels which have been set as being very stringent, obviously these how can we say, stipulations will come into place, and obviously there will be redress on any failings.
So there's issues of we've got, obviously we can do things about the healthcare professionals' performance, and we can do things about the more general contract performance. Obviously, our objective will be, if at all possible, not to get into that position and to work very closely with the providers on a day-to-day basis to try and identify any problems that are occurring and solve them quickly. Because clearly, having to get to the point where we have to resort to contractual sanctions is clearly not ideal, but they are there and in a very strong way.
Thanks.
You're getting it right first time in Portland, because we're now on to appeals. And questions Nigel has.
I think we've all dealt with people who've had to appeal assessments elsewhere. What kind of level of appeal for people who don't get the result they want are you expecting to run from PIP?
Well, we'll be looking at the, sorry, did you say the appeal numbers sort of coming through?
Well,
what will we monitor that on?
What are you expecting to see as appeals under PIP?
Well, what we're working on to ensure that you've probably got the right structure in place, the right support in place, and obviously we're working very closely with the MOJ. We're looking at the number of appeals that are coming through at the moment for DLA, and we'll look at a worst case scenario and we'll work on that. However, I think an important addition to this, because you're quite right, you do want to get it right first time. You don't want people to go through an appeal process, but obviously it's there because you need to have that. We're bringing in a mandatory reassessment, which will be, I think, easier, it will be quicker, and that will allow people to reassess the facts straight away rather than having to go through an appeal process. If you think more information should have been taken on board, then we can do that during this reassessment process.
I think you mean reconsideration.
Reconsideration.
Okay, two questions. One, that mandatory reconsideration process hasn't been a roaring success elsewhere, has it? I mean, I've never seen a constituent have their decision changed during that process, so I hope you can make it more effective for this than it has been. Second was, you said you're looking at what the worst case level of appeals would be from current data. Could you tell us what you think that worst case appeal rate's going to be?
Yes, at the moment the worst case would be 80,000 a month, I think I'm correct in saying.
We're assuming from 13-14, 44,000 per annum, and rising to 80,000 per annum by 16-17 on those sort of projections on PIP. But as the Minister says, we have based those assumptions largely on the experiences of the DLA, of the experiences in an ESA, and they are necessarily pessimistic so that we can prepare with our colleagues in HMCTS for the worst case. What we would hope is that the mandatory reconsideration process, which actually has been introduced in a strictly mandatory way. I know it has existed before, but not necessarily has been applied consistently across the department. It's been introduced in a more systematic and mandatory way from April for PIP, and then for other benefits from October this year. We're hoping that will give claimants a better opportunity to raise queries, better opportunity for decision makers to actually take into account new information rather than it going to appeal. And also for decision makers to clearly explain reasons for decision, because actually that does drive a proportion of appeals, people not understanding the decision and the reason for the decision that they've received.
So when you're preparing with the court service for these appeals, what length of time to hear the appeal are you targeting? Are you targeting something less than 8 months or 12 months? You're trying to get that down to something much more reasonable?
Yes, we are. I think at the moment it's running for DLA at around about 21.29 weeks, and I'm afraid I'll have to write separately in terms of what we're projecting in relation to personal independence payments. But yes, we would hope to reduce that that time. Of course, we're also introducing in from April this year for PIP direct lodgement of appeals with HMCTS as well. But the combination of that and mandatory reconsiderations, we would hope to reduce overall appeals waiting times.
And is there going to be a time limit on reconsiderations? There's going to be because there is a fear that somebody expressed that then becomes a kind of bit of a black hole into which their claim falls, and presumably they get they've lost their DLA. So the longer these periods go on, the more difficult it's going to be.
There'll be, I need to confirm and write to the committee separately to confirm whether that will be a time limit in a sort of mandatory sense. But if there isn't, there will be a sort of target, an internal management target for that period. But I just need to confirm which of those it will be.
If somebody, just to be clear, when people get their letter telling them that DLA is stopping, and then they go through the process of assessment, so their DLA stop at that point completely, so they get no money.
No,
as is now, when someone receives the notification that their DLA is ceasing, actually we announced in December when we with the announcement that people would get a 1 month run on of their DLA to allow them to manage the change.
So there is going to be a gap anyway, even without a longish reconsideration period.
What do you mean?
Well, I've got DLA, I get my letter telling me my DLA is finishing. I have a month to put in a fresh application.
No,
my DLA will run on for that month, but after that I have no DLA until and unless I qualify for PIP.
There's no limit on stopping you reapplying for PIP or in the meantime.
Put in for your reconsideration.
No, but people will have their money, they will cease to have money for a period of time.
No. I think you don't get assessed for PIP, as if you currently get DLA and don't get assessed, that's what you're talking about. I think we're just trying to understand what the elapsed periods would be, and presumably that must be part of the financial modelling, because, for example, the elapsed time, to go to appeal and then a backdated, claim or whatever. I mean, that must all be part of quite sophisticated modelling.
I wasn't sure apologies, I wasn't sure where the question was going there, but what you've got, obviously, you can apply for a reconsideration straight away. As you say, there is a month's period where you get the money continuing on, but you can sort of reapply.
But there's already been a gap, because I'm in receipt of DLA, I get my letter telling me it is going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
But it may run on for a month.
Yeah.
I have a month to put back my form. I'll take the full month to get my form back in, or maybe even longer, because I'm given the concession of longer, because I have some difficulty getting it in. Then there's going to come a point where I cease to have my DLA, and I haven't been assessed for PIP yet. I'm then assessed for PIP and refused, and I asked for a reconsideration.
No, that doesn't happen at all. I think you're.
And I think we must be at cross purposes, because one of the things we have always committed to is that people's DLA will continue until their PIP, they have received their first decision in relation to PIP.
Right, so as long as they get their form in,
the DLA won't stop.
It won't
until
stop.
They've got a determination.
But it's only people who don't get the form in whose benefit will stop.
If people choose not to return the form,
or don't because they're
then we would, after 4 weeks, we would suspend entitlement, so not withdraw it but suspend it, and then for the further 4 weeks after that, then we would benefit entitlement would cease. That's on people being reassessed from DLA to PIP.
So if somebody's reassessed, they've got the form in, so their DLA goes on being paid, they have their assessment, they're refused DLA at that point, and they ask for a reconsideration, then they'll have no money in the reconsideration period.
You mean PIP?
They refuse PIP, yeah.
I think we've got some questions on this, so
that's why I think a time limit's quite important. That was all.
I'll bring Aidan in, so that moves us on to the next section anyway.
I think just off the back of that, I have a similar concern to Sheila in that I think there is a concern, certainly amongst some of my constituents, that in a sense people aren't planning to stop receiving something, and it's until it suddenly cuts off that they suddenly realise they've got to make changes to their lifestyle. So I think there's perhaps a kind of wider question about how you can mitigate people kind of not planning for a big change that they for whatever reason don't really factor in or don't understand until actually suddenly the money stops, and then they haven't planned for that. Has the department kind of thought about that? Because that's something that I know.
So in this case, they've no longer got, as you could get now if you've had your award reviewed, you might get it, you might not. Well, I guess in that instance, then they will go to the job centre. They will seek out advice, and they will be given information on what other support they might need. It could be access to work, it could be ESA, it could be something within universal credit. So yes, there will be signposting in that regard. Yes.
But they've only got 4 weeks to deal with that, because as they've been on DLA, they continue to get DLA whilst they're having their PIP assessment. The PIP assessment is negative. They decide not to appeal, they accept it. From that point on, there is 4 weeks run over, to use your term, of when they're still getting the old DLA, after which they've got to adjust to the new landscape, which is quite a short period of time.
Yeah, it could be, without wishing to sort of get into the very detailed mechanics, I suppose as individuals are typically paid 4 weekly in arrears, depending on when their last payday was and they got their notification, I suppose it could be up to and they'll get the 4 weeks run as well. So I suppose they could theoretically get up to 8 weeks if they'd just been paid. But you're quite right, it's a short period.
Just building on that, the process for reassessing all the remaining working age DLA claims was originally scheduled to begin in October 2013 and is now not planned until 2015.
October 2015.
What convinced you that it was necessary to delay the bulk of those reassessments from 2013 to 2015?
Well, because it was a new benefit, we wanted to ensure that everything that all our intentions were being fulfilled. Hence, it does start with a small sample area, then we sort of roll out nationally, then we have new applications. So really, it was to ensure that the purpose of the benefit was fulfilled, and within that, something that we'd committed to do was have these reviews, and we felt really we couldn't continue doing sort of assessing the DLA until we'd had those reviews done, and that one is in 2014, so we've got to learn from it, ensure it's right, and before we proceed further, and I think that is only correct and right.
I'd agree with that. I guess the question still remains, what you describe is understandable that you'd want to have the review in 2014 and then make the change in 2015. In that case, why was it originally envisaged for 2013 before the review was even scheduled to take place? It seems a very different timescale that doesn't take into account.
I see. Well, a bit like anything, the consultation period for this, I guess, when we were taking advice, advice from whether it was lobby groups, charity groups, various other people. We listened to what they said. One of the key concerns was the speed with which we were rolling out this new benefit, and we agreed that was correct, and this is what we do, and this is how we do it. There are various other things that happened over those 18 months, but I think that goes to show that it was a proper, full consultation.
And then there's another timescale, isn't there, which is the initial implementation of new claims in Northern England is in April 2013, and then the processing of the new claims across the rest of Great Britain is just 2 months later in June. So that almost kind of goes against the philosophy you've just described of waiting, assessing, listening to people, having a review.
No.
It's only a 2 month. It seems a very short period of time to roll it out nationally.
Well, I think that very different. These are new sort of. How can we say, new claims coming on. One was, as you say, limited geographically, then it was rolled out, but these were all new claims coming on.
There's still lessons to learn, though, aren't there?
The significant difference within the numbers, really, so I don't think so.
I think that period is less about learning about the assessment than actually just confirming that all the processes actually work before we start to roll out more widely. And
if a process doesn't work, is 2 months enough time to sort it out?
But I mean, I think obviously there's a huge amount of work going into trying to make sure that the processes actually do work before we get to that point. But clearly, it's a sort of belt and braces. It allows the opportunity to pick up any final problems with processes.
We'd say that was
it's not going to be enough time to tell us about the assessment itself. Clearly.
I mean, the counter argument is if you could have a big bang approach and just roll it out nationally straight away.
Well, no.
You're going to be able to do much in the 2 months.
I think that was something we would not do. I think Simon, you might want to come in there, but that certainly is something we would not want to do with all these people.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's you're right. It is a short period, but in that period, we believe we can certainly test things like the telephony system, the way in which the telephony system and the telephony process links to the actual benefits processing activity, and we can also we'll clearly also have a clear picture of the way in which the IT is working. So and 5,000 claims a month is sufficient to be able to ensure that that's working in live running without it and actually being clear that we will then be able to ramp that up in June to the national rollout.
Debbie, I think. Oh, sorry. Sorry,
I
Debbie.
think Debbie was going to come back to that, and I'll come to Jane. Yeah.
There's a broader question around independent evaluation of the scheme as a whole, particularly related to the first section of questions that you had. What independent evaluation will you be doing on the broader effects of the introduction of PIP around, for example, additional people on disabilities and poverty, effects in terms of their physical and mental health, their social health in terms, for example, around isolation, usage of health of the NHS and social care services, and also the costs associated with that. Is that something that you will be doing, and is that already being planned? Because now is the time for this type of work to be planned.
Yes, we are looking at, all those things, of course we are, and that was part of the reason that we're doing the review in 2014 to take all of these factors into consideration, and that's when I said at the start of the meeting we've got very much a blank piece of paper at the moment for how we're going to do that review in 2014, and we'd like to work closely with the select committee to see what would be our priorities in those.
To be fair, it might be worth saying we did push the witnesses earlier on those areas. I think we did some probing on that.
Okay. Can I just add a plea then, as a former academic researcher in the health, that this is the time for it to actually be done, not, you want to be doing it as you're planning the system rather than actually when it's being introduced.
Yeah, and that's why we'd said at the beginning we're working very closely with the Department of Health, we're working closely with local communities, the Local Government Association, all of those things are being done, and with that we've, as I said, we've got the review in 2014.
Just a quick one actually. I think Mr. Dawson, you kind of answered earlier, which was about the time people getting extra time if they needed it to send their form back. Concerns particularly raised by the National Autistic Society about that. And I think you might want to just reiterate, you said that people would be able to ask for more time, particularly if it was obvious they needed to consult and get support from carers.
Yeah, absolutely, and we've actually built into the process that we're anticipating that sort of people can routinely and it's far more straightforward for them to actually get that extra time that they need. And that will be built into the process and also into the guidance for our decision makers as well.
It's a kind of linked question. I mean, I suppose you've obviously engaged, I imagine, with that society amongst other advocates, but there's a number of points made in relation to autism, and particularly some thoughtful points made in debate last week, the work capability assessment debate, about the nature of some people with autism seeking to, if you like, overestimate their own ability to do certain things, which could prejudice them in certain assessments. Is that something you've taken into account? Have you looked at that evidence that's been submitted?
Yeah. And I think it is for that reason that you can go to the assessment with somebody. So we have taken that into consideration, and I met with some of those groups only the other week as they raised their concerns, and fair point, and we have built that into the assessment. Bill, you're nodding there. Did you want to add anything else?
I think it is actually an incredibly important group, and I think at all stages of the process, and not just at the outset, but all the way through, making sure that that we actually recognise the particular needs during the assessment itself, and indeed in communicating the results subsequently of the assessment.
Yeah, we're into the home straight. I've got a few questions. Stephen wants things with...
I just actually have a specific question around deafness, which makes me a little concerned that DWP may not quite understand the different strength of deafness, in the sense that under Activity 7, an individual, if they need communication support to express or understand basic verbal information, that scores them 8 points. And then the case study 9, in the original consultation, features a deaf young person who uses sign language as his main form of communication. He is considered unable to understand basic information and hence scored 8 points. I think that's great. What I would just flag up is that there are a very large number of people who are often defined as deafened. So it's not someone like myself who's hard of hearing, but someone who is profoundly deaf but doesn't use sign language. Many tens of thousands of people in that situation, either middle-aged deafened, where they lost all their hearing overnight, or profoundly deaf young people who do not come from a sign language background and use oralism. As I'm sure you're aware, that means that their ability to communicate is very poor. And my anxiety is that because they don't use sign language, it may be assumed that they don't get the 8 points because their communication ability is good. It's not. It's actually shockingly poor in that situation. So I would like some sort of reassurance that within the either guidelines or regs that the DWP understands when it comes to PIP that people who are deaf but not sign language users are also recognised to have profound communication challenges.
I think that's something that we will make sure is absolutely captured in the guidance and how it's to be, and how that activity is to be applied.
Good, and I'd happily advise if you wish as well.
Can I pick the Minister, you said about if there's people who lost their help that they get presently through DLA because they don't qualify for the same level of PIP, that access to work might come into play. Have you done any assessment about how much the access to work budget would have to increase if that was the case? And would access to work pick up all the shortfall? You know, I've had someone who lives in a rural area, depends on his mobility car to get to work. Taxis would be £30 a day. Would access to work make up that shortfall if he loses someone with MS, so might only score 10 points instead of the 12 points? Will access to work be able to pick up for that? And how timidly would access to work be able to do that assessment and pay out the money? Because if it's going to be 3-4 months, and sometimes it's up 6 months for access to work at the moment, that person's lost their job.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on this, on who the people would be, how they would be affected, and have you got that report in front of you on who would be and how it would affect them?
What I can say is that we've been doing some work with Motability and the Access to Work people, and we're trying to work out ways in which we can actually ensure that there's that smooth transition, so that actually people will still have their Motability vehicle until the Access to Work support is put in place. Which hopefully provides some reassurance.
The irony of the example I've just given you is that the the amount we would have got through PIP was a lot less than it's going to cost access to work to put them to work and taxes. And that's
we had what I was looking to there was actually the work that we'd done on DLA and work, the exploratory research and evidence review on who would be in work, who would have needed the support, and whether DLA appears to have been of any help or support for those people. This is the report I was looking at, and actually those findings showed it had not. Equally, we've also been doing work with access to work to find out if they could pick up, and yes, they can, and we are extending access to work to help more people. So that was the...
But the budget would have to increase, they're starting to pick the...
But that is what is happening at the moment with access to work.
Okay. But that budget was supposed to increase, for example, to help other people. Is the increase you've already put in place, you think, enough to cover this situation?
Yes, I do.
Are you going to publish any of this work you've been doing in a way that people could read it? Or
we've already published the DLM work exploratory research that the Minister mentioned. That was published in July 2010.
But that was a long time ago. It wasn't about PIP. It was about DLA, clearly. Yeah. And presumably it was done before any of this was even a glimmer in anybody's eye, because some of it was published in July 2010. It was presumably commissioned a good deal earlier.
With all due respect, the worst thing you want to happen as a minister is people lose their PIP and they lose their job as well.
Yeah,
the headlines start appearing that that's not going to be very comfortable.
The report actually shows, and this is what I thought you were.
Yeah, I think the point I think trying to make is that actually the evidence suggests that very few people in receipt of DLA are actually in employment, and in fact there is some research that suggests that DLA in itself is a disincentive for people to seek employment.
So it was from those that we were looking at it, how to support people, and if those people, if it did impact on people who were in work, how we could support them. And yes, I'm confident that would come through access to work, because that's where I would be directing them. And as we're opening that up as an award and expanding it, I feel confident that would be the way forward. And the support.
Sorry, another thing that's confusing that seems to have changed is the position of people turning 16. Now, I'm pretty sure that we as a committee got the assurance from your predecessor that the 16-year-olds would not be part of the first migration onto the new PIP. In fact, they would be the last cohort that would be, I keep saying migrated, whose DLA will stop and they will be put onto PIP. But the understanding from the sheet that the DWP's put out about the implementation dates, it appears that people turning 16 will be classed as a new claimant, therefore they will have to apply for PIP from October 2013. That puts them at the sharp end of the implementation of PIP. And they will be disproportionately the largest group that will be coming onto PIP, because obviously it's an age cohort rather than a geographic area. So why is that changed? And there's a lot of again charities dealing with children, because after all at 16 they're still children, especially as the education leaving age is to go up to 18. The children are going to face this cliff edge and are going to be the guinea pigs for the introduction of PIP. Why did all that change?
Well, I don't believe they're going to be the guinea pigs for PIP, because on the numbers it will be 8 out of every 100 will be the new 16-year-olds applying. They were making this transition as smooth as possible, with as much notice as possible, and giving all the support that was there. And we felt at that age, it is the age where you're thinking of, adulthood. It is about support, and we believed that was the correct way forward. But it certainly was not about anybody being a guinea pig. It was about a smooth transition and support going to these people.
But these children will still be in education. In fact, the sizable part of this cohort actually have an education leaving age of 19, not 18. So they're in the middle of their secondary education, and their whole basis of the benefits, that probably is the thing that is most valuable to the family and helping to support them, will potentially change or in fact disappear. because they will be moving from DLA, from the DLA they got the child DLA to PIP?
Well, for that journey into adulthood, for many children, they will think that does start at 16 as they prepare for adulthood. Many things would happen at 16. We felt that was the age that we could support them the best. And as I said, we're looking for a smooth transition for them. No?
Okay, I don't know if any of my
would you consider asking your providers to carry out their assessment in and with the schools that these young people attend? Because these are the people who know these young people the best. Would you consider asking them to do that? Is that in the guidance?
We could ask that. Obviously, these children would bring the parents, they could bring a carer, they could bring whoever. As we know, it could be home visits, it could be at a location they know. So I feel that could be a fair request.
It may be that schools would be a source of useful evidence, and perhaps that's something we need to think about in the guidance as one of the potential sources of evidence about the impact of disabilities.
Because the SENCO officer in each of the schools, that's a very good idea of my colleague, the SENCO officer in each of the schools will actually have detail in a lot of the youngsters with disabilities heading up that age. And that would be a classic example, if we don't take advantage of that, of right hand of government not listening to left hand of government, because they would have copious files. So I think that's a very good suggestion to take on board.
Well, I've said I will take that back.
Okay, well, can I thank, on behalf of the committee, you coming along this
Sorry,
afternoon?
Can I just ask about older people?
It
would appear that people who turn 65 when this all starts will be reassessed. Is that correct? Even though the reassessment won't start until
2017.
People who turn 65 are in receipt of DLA after the 8th of April this year will be still in the reassessment pool, so will be selected for reassessment at some point between then and when mandatory assessment starts in October 15 and October 17.
But we were originally told that age group wouldn't be affected.
I think we've always made clear that people over the age of 65 who are in receipt of DLA from the 8th of April, they won't be that PIP won't be applied to them. It's those in the reassessment pool, I think, but to whom this applies.
But if you're 65 in May this year, or when this starts, you can be reassessed. And
if you're in receipt of DLA?
Yeah, and you're in receipt of DLA now. If we hadn't had this change, you would go on getting your DLA into retirement. You're now saying that group will be reassessed, which is, I think, different from what people had understood to be the situation.
That doesn't sound right.
Can we take that one
away?
I think you've got the numbers wrong that way.
Because that's actually quite important.
Yeah,
that means that somebody who's 60 today is already in receipt of DLA.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they will? Well, no, it would have to be 60. They would be well, I suppose everybody would be reassessed anyway. No, so, it might be worth clarifying exactly
we'll clarify that
what's happening. Okay. Well, again, can I say thank you very much for coming along. Actually, time has flown past. It may not have felt quite that way for yourself, Minister. It's been quite long, and we do have a lot of questions, but there is a lot of concern amongst the not just the population that received DLA, but people and their carers and people support them, and they are very, very worried. So anything you can do to allay some of those fears would be much appreciated. So, but thank you anyway for coming along this afternoon and answering our questions. Order. The meeting is now adjourned.
Portcullis House, the Grimond Room,